G'day everybody, welcome to this very special day on Jafffa Adventures. My name is Terry and we're going to hook back into this 200 series bonnet scoop installation. However, before I do that, as I said, today's a special day. Today's Australia Day. So happy Australia Day everybody. How good is this? I'm out here banging around in the shed, which is fantastic. This afternoon I'm heading over to a good mate's place and we're going to have some beers, sit around the pool, and have a bit of a sausage sizzle later on in the day as well. So you can't get a better Australia Day than that, and I hope you're doing exactly what you want to do on this day today as well. So the next step on this build is to put this bonnet scoop onto the 200 series bonnet and weld it down in place. And that's what we're going to get stuck into now. So let's do it. Before I get stuck into this welding, here's a handy little tool that my dad and I made, when I was probably 15 or 16 years old. It's just a bit of timber and a bit of old rebar with a blunt end sort of grinded onto it. And that piece there fits up underneath of your shoulder. So the idea behind this is you pop that up underneath of your shoulder. That allows you to push that panel down nice and flat, and then you can get the welder going and tack it down in place. So that's been used a couple of times on some projects of mine, and it's quite handy, so there you go. Of course, when you're welding a big flat panel like this, heat is your big enemy, and what results from heat is warpage. So you want to try and keep the warpage down to an absolute minimum. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'll spot weld this in place. I'll do that with each spot weld being a reasonable distance from the next one to try to spread that heat load out a little bit. And I've got a cool rag as well, so I'll throw that along as I go and just try to keep things cool. And I'll do that all the way around the panel and just start filling in those spot welds until we've got a fully welded in bonnet scoop. Takes a lot of time, and you got to go slow. If you push it, you'll end up putting too much heat into the panel and you'll warp it, especially when you've got a large flat panel like this. So patience is what you've got to do here, and keep that heat down to an absolute bare minimum. Alright, the bonnet scoop is fully welded down now. So I'm just going to hit this with some wax and grease remover. I've already hit it with some clip thinners. So wax and grease remover, and then a quick etch prime. That etch prime is not going to be a permanent thing, but it'll stop the rust while I'm working on the underside. Alright, we'll mix this etch primer up. It's a 1K etch primer, so no need for a catalyst. And it's diluted 2 parts paint and 1 part thinners. normally I would run that paint through a strainer to make sure that it would pull out any lumps or crap. But because this is just a temporary prime, which is going to get pretty much sanded off anyway, it's just a quick shot. All right, we'll throw some gloves on because this bloody stuff gets everywhere. It's massively humid out today, so it's not an ideal day to be spraying this either. But I can't leave that metal bare. So you work with what you've got. I've got just a small gun for this type of work. I don't have a whole lot of paint to shoot. I got a little bit of primer left over, so I'll actually dust the rest of the bonnet, just as a bit of a guide coat. We'll be going into guide coats a lot more heavily later on down the track, but suffice to say it's just a light dusting used to find out where the high and the low spots are on your bonnet or on your panel so that you can do some fill work. All right, there's what our bonnet looks like at the moment. The next step is to flip that sucker over and start working out the ductwork on the underside. So my aim is to try and keep the ductwork for both the 79 series and the 200 series. Now I'm not sure whether that's going to be possible, but we'll give it a crack. So I'll mark each of the points where the ductwork mounts for the 200 and make sure that when I'm trimming these inner frame off, I don't trim those points off. Now that frame mounts down inside of there. The reason I need to keep this is where the scoop mounts into. So here's what I've determined. I've got to get that piece in underneath because I need this frame. So that being the case, I am going to have to chop this structure out and may be able to weld it back in once this 79 piece is in. But I think what I will do is chop it up at its extremities, chop it here, and then take it off along this front edge. That'll allow me to get that piece inside, and then I may actually be able to weld this frame back on again. Now I've gone ahead and marked with masking tape each of the spots that I need to cut. So we'll get the cutting wheel and we'll take this inner frame out. Okay, we've got our frame sitting in there and the scoop, 79 series scoop, sits in like that. The 200 series scoop sits in like that. So, they're different positions. The 79 series is back marginally. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to use this 200 series scoop because it lines up with the intercooler. I'm going to have to cut a hole in the back of this so that it can flush up against this one. And then we'll get air going from both scoops, from both these front rams and from the 79 series scoop, blowing through the intercooler. First things first, however, I've got to mount this frame into the inside of this bonnet. And to do that, I'm going to Sikaflex these back down where they were originally, and then I'll weld this front edge, and that'll lock it in quite firm. Now the stuff I'm going to lock this down with is Sikaflex 252, which is an absolutely brilliant product. When this stuff dries, it is impossible to pull apart. Now that glue is gone off, so we'll get rid of our little clamps. That's excellent, nice and solid there. Okay, next step is to get the internal frame and do the same with that. Put little dots of glue on everything and lock it down. Okay, let's dab this little sucker up. Have it. All right. So we'll let that glue go off for 24 hours, and tomorrow break out the welder, weld up this front edge here, and then I'll see whether I can take that piece that I cut off of here and actually fill this as well. Alright, that front edge is temporarily tacked in place. I'll get the scoop insert and mount that and flip the bonnet over and make sure that that's sitting in there properly. And if that's the case, then we'll fully weld this. That scoop insert sits beautifully, which is fantastic. So that means we're ready to fully weld that interior structure. I've welded this all fully in now. And just put the Sikaflex 252 over top of the welds after I ground them down. Put a brace in the back here, pinned that down and welded it, pinned that down and welded it, and then the same on this front edge. So that is a pretty bloody sturdy bonnet now. When you grab it by the corners, there's absolutely no flex in it, which is exactly what we're looking for. So just looking at the ductwork, this is the 79, which sits in that location. This is the 200, it sits in that location. And we're actually in pretty good shape. I'll be able to cut a hole here, and that's where the 79 butts up against the 200 ductwork. So what that means is I'll be able to retain the 79 ductwork and the 200 ductwork with the 79 air feeding into the 200 air. And that's what I was hoping to accomplish, because I want to force as much air as I can through that intercooler. So the next step, I'll wipe down the inside of the bonnet with some thinners, and I'll hit the inside or interior of the bonnet with some etch primer. Right, so I'm going to use the large gun because this is going to be a coat that's going to permanently stay here. Okay, the etch primer is down. Now we'll just wait for that paint to set up, and I'll be able to flip the bonnet over and start the panel beading on the top side. But this side is basically done until paint.